Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. Jump right into this with a man at the center of everything coming up and just a few weeks ago. State Senator Bill Eigel, welcome back to the show.
Scott, thanks for having me.
So let's talk about a couple weeks ago, primary season wrap up. Your race, it was a boring race. It ended up starting boring and ending boring, but had a blip in the middle. The largest dark money contribution anybody's ever seen in the state Senate race hit your race.
Right.
How'd you deal with it?
Well, we got our message out, and my message has always been one that defends life, that tries to reduce government and cut taxes. And you know, for the past 4 years, I think the people of St. Charles County have gotten to know me for being exactly that person. So when somebody came in the door and said I was something else, I don't think it was received very well. And it was very encouraging and humbling to me to have one of the largest three-way victories in the state Senate primary ever in St. Charles County. So it was good. I think the takeaway from that is, you know, we have to wonder if that $300,000, which came from an interest group out in Northwest Missouri from a Republican outfit, could have been better used if it had been pushing back against Medicaid expansion, if it could have been used to maybe help Governor Parson or some of our issues that are on the ballot in November, instead of having a conversation with St. Charles County's voters about whether or not Bill Eigel is pro-life. So I think looking forward, we got to bring the party back together. We're not going to be successful if we have these kinds of fights internally in the Republican Party. And as you can see, it wasn't fooling the people of St. Charles County, and I'm very honored to have that endorsement, not only of my politics from the Republicans of St. Charles County, but my philosophies as well.
I think it was a little bit of a personal endorsement too. The
Absolutely.
attacks were probably more personal than anything else. And let me talk about, you're a member of the Conservative Caucus, maybe the leading member. I know there's not an official leader, but I think when people think of that cause, they think of you. You gained. We had different predictions on the show, from Senator Koenig was on with a prediction to former Senator Lemke. So where would you say the Conservative Caucus in the Missouri Senate stands right now coming into January?
Probably the most common question I've gotten since the beginning of August is, what's the number going to be? Like you asked.
Elaine Gannon, probably not a committed member. I would say future Senator Esslinger, not a committed member. Maybe Jason Bean's not a committed member, but I would assume that Representative Bratton comes in as a member. He said he was. Mike Moon seems to say he was. So that'd be added to your 6, it'd be 8. And then Holly Rader maybe hasn't made her intentions known.
You know, like anything in the Senate, you'll have some folks that want to be public about they're joining the Conservative Caucus or not. But the reality is the number doesn't matter. The Conservative Caucus is a philosophical group. And I think my takeaway from the primary results is that the theme in the chamber is a move towards the more founding principles of the Republican Party. And on that note, I think that's good for the Conservative Caucus, but it's good for the Republican Caucus, and it's good for bringing us back together as a Republican caucus. So as I said about my primary, we've got to get away from these internal us versus them type struggles and move towards working together because we have a lot of challenges ahead, whether it's Medicaid expansion, whether it's the election in November, and we're going to have a lot of things that we need to do to make Missouri stronger, and we can't do that if the party's fractured.
Well, your caucus is a separate part inside the Republican caucus. So I think that people do look at it as if I were, as someone that sits in the gallery and watches you guys, I would believe that, yeah, it does matter. And if I were you, I'd be pretty happy that I grew my caucus. It's a very new thing. And I assume if you had to say plus or minus, you got new members, right?
When you look at the politics of the Conservative Caucus, that is something that is watched very closely, I think, by the people in the hallways of Jefferson City. But when you get out of the hallways of Jefferson City, the things that the Conservative Caucus and the Republican Caucus that they're fighting for are very popular. Look no further than my primary. It was endorsement from the largest Republican stronghold in the state, not just of my philosophy, but of how I do business as well. So it's very encouraging. I think it's great for the Republican Party either way, but we really do have to get away from these us versus them mentalities.
We'll talk about whatever that number is. You're going to have an issue to deal with. Medicaid expansion passed. It's something that passed by quite a significant margin in Missouri. It was what the folks wanted. It's something the Republicans have not wanted to do. Now you've got it. There are some that sat in these chairs and said, oh, year one there's going to be a plus. I never quite bought that. I do think in some parts of the state there'll be health care in year one that wasn't. But maybe year 3, 4, you start to see some of that financial burden shift, and maybe it's a benefit. But in year one, you get a problem, right?
Well,
budget problem.
One of the things, and the courts have already begun weighing in on this, is that you can't tie the hands of future legislatures. So there is also articles within the Constitution that indicate that the legislature alone shall appropriate dollars. So we'll see what that looks like as we get into session, but I don't know that that conversation is necessarily done. I would say...
What are the odds on a court challenge coming in and stopping Medicaid expansion?
I don't know. It's too early.
My
Too
sizable
early to tell.
hillbilly gut says low.
I think it's too early to take a look at that. But again, it's up to the legislature every year to appropriate dollars to all of the programs that are under its control. So we'll see what that looks like as it unfolds. I think that once again, though, my takeaway from the Medicaid expansion discussion is that once again we had an out-of-state special interest come in, sell a very dishonest campaign to the people of Missouri, pretending that it was going to give benefits, cost savings that quite frankly we haven't seen in any other state that has adopted. And I think that this is going to lead to a further conversation about protecting Missouri from out-of-state special interests that are lying to the Missouri people.
So if you do have to take money from somewhere, where are you going to take it from?
Well, the good thing is when it comes to money, I guess, I don't know how it is, but I seem to be in the minority. You know, we have, if you compare it to our revenues today to what they were in 2010.
But you're not going to have new revenues to pay for Medicaid expansion. You have to move some money around, right?
Well, but if you look before COVID, we had record amounts of revenue coming into the state. Record amounts of revenue. We never had more. Every year we were having $200 to $300 million more. And if you look at the budget, there's a lot of places that I think we can go to make that budget more efficient. I'll give you an example. Right now there are 3,500 empty positions that we have funded through the budget bills that were passed this most recent session. I voted against every one of those budget bills because the cost of those 3,500 empty positions is almost $250 million a year. Think about that. We spent $250 million for empty positions. So when people tell me that there's not enough money, whether it's for Medicaid expansion, which I think is a bad idea, or maybe tax cuts, which is a more common theme that I fight against, I don't buy it. There's plenty of money. The state has never had more money, whether it's federal dollars coming in or even general revenue dollars coming in. There's plenty of money. The revenue side of the equation is not the problem. The spending side of the equation is the problem.
Clean Missouri. Something that every Republican railed against. It won overwhelmingly at the ballot. Mm-hmm. The Republicans in the legislature put it back on the ballot. I thought it was a little bit of a contradiction, though. To me, Clean Missouri was a redistricting bill with some great marketing about some ethics stuff. And I thought sane Republicans, rational, said these things are mixed. There was a lawsuit about it. Now, the Republicans went back and put something that's also mixed. The courts have rewritten some of the ballot language. There were some Republicans that threw up a red flag and said, I don't think this is going to work. I don't think this will pass a court challenge. Well, it's not passing a court challenge right now. What if this happens? I mean, what is going to be the Republicans' response to if there's two victories for Clean Missouri?
Well, first of all, the recent decision by the Cole County judge that rewrote the ballot language for Cleaner Missouri was outrageous. The idea that any ballot
measure... It'll be appealed, right? I mean, yeah.
It will be appealed, but that decision was outrageous. And actually, this starts a further conversation, a deeper conversation. Just like having special interests coming into the state and lying to the people of Missouri, you know, we need to look at some of these judicial decisions that are coming out. I mean, we had a horrible decision a couple months ago by the Supreme Court that said the legislature must fund Planned Parenthood, and now we have a decision coming out by the Supreme Court interfering with what was a very well-written Cleaner Missouri initiative ballot language. So I think that what's going to start is a conversation about who are these judges? What are they doing? And what way can the legislature push back on what these judges are doing that are so far out of step with what both the legislative and executive branch want to do? I think that's the next conversation we need to have.
Here in Missouri, planned debate coming up. It'll be fun. I don't want to let you go, though. You'll be heading back to Jeff City at some point. There was a special session called on crime. The Senate passed a bill that I think folks could have called a crime plan. The House took the bill, did not decide to move forward with it. It broke it up into a bunch of smaller bills. Looks like this week they'll come and send you something. The governor came out with an addition to the call about Kim Gardner. Let me just start with the questions. If the House sends you something close to what you sent them, but it broken down in miniature bills, can you get that done?
So first let me say, the answer is yes. But first let me say, there's never a bad day to talk about law and order. And I think Governor Parson is spot on by doing anything he can do to bring attention to an issue that has plagued our largest urban center for decades, for generations. You know, the folks running St. Louis City, the Democratic Party, which has gone back to World War II exclusively, we're seeing the results that have been so bad down in St. Louis City that now the state feels like it has to get involved to try to find ways to bring down the crime problem. People are leaving that area, crime is soaring in that area, and it's a real indictment of the policies that have been in place by the leaders that have been elected to go the opposite direction of St. Louis. Now, to your question, when it comes to the politics of the special session, I think that it's safe to say that not everything has probably gone according to plan, as whether you're the governor or the Senate or the House. But the reality is also that we're going to pass some of these. Are we going to pass all of the things that the governor has asked for? Probably not. That's the way the legislature works.
Yeah.
That's the way a special session works, and
Now
there's
let's
some
talk
risk.
about Kim Gardner, though. There was so after she's reelected in a landslide,
Right.
then they add a thing to give concurrent jurisdiction to the Attorney General. I don't think most people watching this truly would argue with the fact that Eric Schmidt's office could do a better job prosecuting murders than Kim Gardner's office has in the past. I think that just make the relationship with the cops are better. I don't know that, but should you take that step is what I hear Republicans questioning, and how far are you willing to go to take that step?
The fact that we're having this conversation is an indictment of Kim Gardner and the folks that are being elected down in St. Louis
It's
City.
an indictment of the people in the city of St. Louis because they reelected her in a huge margin.
You know, I hesitate to indict a large group of people like that, but I will say that, like, the Democratic Party has been in charge of the city of St. Louis going back to World War II.
Good Lord.
And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And now it's gotten to the point that Jefferson City is considering stepping in and changing how we've done business as a state for the past 150 years in order to fix these problems. Because the folks down there that are in charge of St. Louis City are not getting it done.
Well, Senator, thank you so much for coming and talking politics with us.
Happy to be here, Scott, anytime.
We'll be right back with our Opinion Maker panel. Tracy McCreery joins the show after this. But first, go to showmissouri.com. We're back after our COVID breakup in Clark County. As far northeast as you can go in the state of Missouri. Every glass of water you drink in St. Louis probably floated past Clark County before it got to you. We are back with our Opinion Maker panel after this.
Your energy needs are changing. That's why at Ameren, Missouri, we're not waiting on the future. We're building it with the Smart Energy Plan, advancing thousands of projects across the state, helping reduce emissions through cleaner energy sources, boost reliability with self-healing equipment, and better withstand storms with new composite poles. Moving Missouri forward and bringing us all a little closer together. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Mike Parson served in law enforcement for 22 years. A former sheriff, Parson is tough on crime. Governor Parson is standing up for victims, investing in better mental health services, and cracking down on violent crime and drugs. Governor Parson's anti-crime initiatives have led to the arrests of hundreds of violent criminals and gang members. A former sheriff, a conservative, tough on crime governor. Mike Parson is making Missouri families safer.
Welcome back to Week in Missouri Politics Opinion Maker panel time. Sam Gladney, local attorney here in St. Louis. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Representative Tracy McCreery, welcome back.
Thank you.
David Barklage, Dean of the Republican Party, welcome back, sir.
Always.
And Chris Voss, welcome back to the show, sir. Republican operative.
Good to be back.
Representative, so you're heading back to Jeff City tomorrow to talk special crime session. I guess there's sometimes when the dumpster fire is done and it's not your fire, it's not your dumpster, you just stand back and watch, right?
Well, it was really interesting because the governor wanted there to be a special session on violent crime before the primary, and his own party said that that wasn't going to happen. So now we're kind of redoing things and taking our time to do things right after the primary. But, you know, I think the lesson that came out of this last week, I heard a couple of the bills and general laws, is that police officers and law enforcement need better tools and resources and better laws, quite frankly, in order to keep all of us safe.
So I'm glad it's an interesting thing. I mean, I think everybody has a problem, sees the problem with the murders in St. Louis City, but I only hear Republicans trying to do anything about it.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily true. I mean, we just had elections in St. Louis. I think there are a lot of people trying to do a lot to fix it, and one of the things they're talking about is reinvesting in the community, you know, through early childhood education and a lot of other steps. So I think folks in St. Louis, you know, nobody feels the pain of what's going on in St. Louis more than the people who live there every day, and I think there are a lot of good faith efforts going about to try to get things turned around.
As I follow your organization closely, when I hear reinvesting in communities, I hear like that's the been around more public, more suburban friendly term for defund the police.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about what's going on in St. Louis and Kansas City, you look at local prosecutors like Kim Gardner and Gene Peters Baker, they failed their residents, and the federal government's had to come in to really try to put these violent criminals in jail. what we're talking about during this special session isn't petty crimes, not minor offenses. These are the worst of the worst: violent crime, armed criminal action, murder, and really glad that the governor called the legislature back.
I think a lot of this, there could be something called a crime bill that probably passes that we can declare victory on. Yeah. When they brought in concurrent jurisdiction and added to the call, I think this session's become about Kim Gardner. Now, I understand that to most people, frankly, most just fair-minded observers, she probably looks like she would fail her community. But her community voted, and they overwhelmingly re-elected her.
Well, I think that the governor, through COVID, has shown the fact that a Polk County sheriff trusts like Dr. Sam Page in terms of COVID in the community, or Quentin Lucas. So I think this message is a little at cross purposes. I think it's driven primarily by the Attorney General, whose job it is to do these kinds of things, and I think the governor is trying to facilitate that, and it's a concern. Look, we're in a divided country where we have probably two competing visions, but they're both going to the same result. And it's whether you're passing tougher laws or reinvesting, it should be both. But the problem is that along that way, there's just a lot of, and the kind of environment we're in makes it very, very tough. So I don't think it was an overreach. I think it was a move the Attorney General needed to push on. I just think that in the time we're in, everything is sort of seen in a negative light, first strike.
Well, let me talk about this, though. I mean, there's a political aspect to everything. In election year, two months before election, it's surely political. Nicole Galloway would probably really be talking about schools opening and COVID response, really be talking about health care. Instead, she's going to have to decide, do you take the position of, no, Kim Gardner's doing a fine job, and tick off folks in Kirkwood and Chesterfield, Arnold, that she needs their votes? Or do you take the position of, no, someone to step in? The longer crime's out there, that's probably good for the governor, right?
Well, I'm not sure that when you talk to everyday Missourians that they're focused on crime. There's small segments of our state that are dramatically impacted by crime, but I think Auditor Galloway is on the right track with focusing on the pandemic. And we have a bunch of kids heading back to school, whether it's college or K through 12. We are not going to be able to get away from the pandemic and COVID. And I think Nicole Galloway's message of respecting science, believing science, and pushing for good public health efforts is where she needs to be.
So we have the guy I've always felt like in Missouri, Jay Nixon. He knows a little something about getting votes in this state. Talk about work, talk about health care, talk about education, good time for Democrats. Republicans are talking about law and order, very good for them.
There's generally a case that that's true. I think Democrats are talking about, like I said, fixing the problems in St. Louis as well. Hopefully there will be a long, serious conversation about ways to do it that are productive and that will actually solve the problem, because right now, one thing everybody can agree on is what's happening in the city and in Kansas City just is not sustainable. It's not good for anybody.
Yeah, bro, this conversation has been long now.
Well, look, let me say a couple things. One, I take exception on Nicole. I think Nicole is taking, our polling shows that a statewide mask mandate is very popular. But the governor is consistent. He's using a data-driven, local, targeted approach, letting, instead of, the sheriff from Polk County come in and tell people how to run St. Louis for the safety of St. Louisans. So Nicole is really grandstanding on that. What we've seen from Nicole in this thing is, fundraising appeal after appeal from her basement, and not really the engagement that we've seen from the leadership of Sam Page, Quentin Lucas, and Governor Parson. And in that regard, I think that the governor is where he needs to be and doing what he needs to be, not for votes, but for public safety.
Prediction time, will there be a bill voted on in the Missouri legislature about taking concurrent jurisdiction and imposing on the city of St. Louis?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
What happened? House?
Yes.
She going to vote on it this week?
I think so.
House?
No.
I'll defer to Tracy on that.
That's what you should probably all do pretty much all the time.
We are kumbaya here.
Yes. David Barklage, just talk about something that I do think is, I always looked at when August starts, I started thinking about going back to school. When August started, now I think about the kids going back to school.
Yeah.
My daughter went back to school this past week to Holy Infant. The Archdiocese is having class just like normal. I will say, as a parent, I think schools did the best they could do at the end of school last year, but honestly, I can't say it was as good of an education as it would have been had kids been in school. I'm kind of a go back to school person, but I do think if it goes poorly, not just in Missouri, but nationwide, that's going to impact Republicans.
I'll say this, guys, the safe bet is keep everybody at home. I mean,
Sure.
that is safe politically. But you hear so much out there from sociologists, psychiatrists, even from the CDC, that they believe that we need to get kids back in school. So I think, unfortunately, we are going to take a public policy issue and partisanize it and weaponize it, but I think the governor's on the right track. I think kids need to be back in school. I think what's going to happen is someone's going to get sick or get very sick, and there's going to be a lot of punishing to those people that pushed them back into school. But politically, it's one thing, but I think from a policy perspective, I don't know if there is truly one right answer. I think it's let's get kids back in school and let's wait and see.
Sam, tell me what you think here. I mean, I think that, first of all, the pandemic is a very challenging situation. No matter what decision you make, a credible person could make a credible argument that you should take the other track. A lot of the states opening up in schools, how's it going to go? And how's it going to go politically?
Well, I mean, I think the most important thing is that I'm a father. My wife and I are both working from home as well. It is really tough for parents to raise young kids without school, because school also serves as sort of a daycare for your kids as well, as a way to get them watched. I think we've seen a real failure at the national level in leadership, and that's why we're having trouble opening schools right now. If we'd done the right things 2, 3, 4, 5 months ago, schools would be open right now like they are in other countries. So I think we're going to have to take it slow. And hopefully we will listen, to the teachers unions that are making some great points about keeping their workers safe and open in a way that is responsible.
Representative, I mean, you're talking to your constituents all the time. My parents worked. So if I didn't go to school and my grandma couldn't keep me, I went to a daycare, which would be the same as a school as far as a pandemic would be concerned. I mean, I think there's some folks thinking not everybody lives in Chesterfield with a nanny. Sometimes people think the whole state lives that way.
Well, that's not how most working Missourians live. And, I think David was onto something, which is the fact that we have local elected school boards, I think, really is important during this pandemic, because a one-size-fits-all approach to schools opening does not work. So let each school board decide. What I would like to see is the administration support the schools with additional things for cleaning and PPE and things like that. I know a lot of schools are struggling to pay for those supplies.
Low control. I like Margie Van Dieven, trust her. However, Wayne Wilcutt was the best Neelyville school board member ever. I trust him more.
Yeah, and I think we should really just be trusting parents in this deal. Education works best when parents are empowered to choose what's best for their child. So I think having the option to send them to school should always be there. But if they choose to go with another option, hybrid at home, they should have that right as well.
Yeah, let's talk a little governor's politics here. Where's the race right now?
I think governor's in double digits. I think we've got polling in the field that's going to confirm that. We just got polling out that confirms that. I think what you're seeing is Trump at a low, because you've seen Trump versus Trump. The debate has been between what Trump is doing right and wrong. I think now that Kamala Harris is out and Biden, it's going to be a race between Biden and Trump. And the Missouri numbers will change decidedly. Trump wins by double digits in Missouri.
Where's the race at for the governor's race right now?
Well, all the polling shows that Governor Parsons' lead has deteriorated over the years. His double-digit lead has been erased, and I think a lot of that has to do with Nicole Galloway being a strong candidate, but also the Democrats picking Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for the top of the ticket. That is huge, and that's going to help carry Nicole across the finish line.
I don't know that lead's deteriorated. I think that's a pretty liberal poll that would, but I think there's a lead is when it's shrunk, and I think if she did not have Joe Biden, there'd be not much point in running for any Democrat this year if it was Bernie Sanders.
I mean, this is the point that a lot of Democrats made during the primaries, that Joe Biden helps candidates like Nicole Galloway, and I don't think even any Republican could really dispute that. He's helping her, because it's really hard to.
Bernie, but
it's very hard to vilify.
Sam's right on this one.
One of the most skilled politicians of our era, Claire McCaskill, brought one national figure that I saw to Missouri, and it was Joe Biden.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to vilify Joe Biden. It's hard to vilify Nicole Galloway. It's hard to do both those things, and so that's what we're seeing.
What does the governor have to do to not have that lead shrink?
I think he's in really strong position. I was a little worried going into the primary with Medicaid expansion on the ballot, but he had a great showing, and I would disagree with you on the fact that it's hard to vilify Nicole Galloway. I think there are a ton of ways to vilify her. First off, she's not showing up to work right now, but she's going to campaign events. Her auditor's office is working from home because of the pandemic, but we've seen her for months fundraising, traveling around the state to in-person events. I think if someone isn't showing up to the job that we're paying them to do right now, there's no point in promoting them.
It's going to be a fun fall. Give me a prediction on where the race ends.
I think Parson wins by 8 to 10 points.
Agree.
8 to 10? Where's the race end?
Nicole will win by just a couple of points.
I think it'll be close.
Yeah, I think somewhere between both sides, maybe where it ends up, which would be a good showing for both. Give me a prediction on where Trump ends in the state.
Trump plus 6.
6?
I'd say maybe 7, 8, but not double digits.
Not double digits?
Absolutely double digits. We're looking at the trend line. I think as this race matures, you'll see that.
Kamala Harris, though, I don't think she hurts Joe Biden at all in Missouri.
I do.
You do?
I do. I think because of his health issues, that she is much more relevant of the vice president
Sure.
than we've seen in recent decades, and she'll be under far more scrutiny.
I saw her as a pretty talented politician, though. I've
She
always
is.
been impressed by her.
I always was afraid of her as being the presidential
Yeah,
candidate.
I remember you
candidly.
saying that.
Yep.
What does the president finish in Missouri?
Double digits in 2012. Biden and Obama lost by 9. Missouri's gotten more red, and Biden's gone further to the left. So,
You think maybe, I always thought the thing about Joe Biden is he is a nice guy. I think it is a little bit hard to come up with some sinister plot, but maybe can you stand up to that left wing? Can you stand up to the socialist wing of that party? I don't know if he can.
after watching the DNC convention this week, I don't think he did a very good job of that.
Well, but his administration could never bring in the DH, and I think that's important to him. Who won the week, Sam Gladney?
I'm going to say State Senator Brian Williams. You know, we're talking about criminal justice reform and those sorts of issues. He is putting forth a very serious effort, has a comprehensive reform bill that would ban chokeholds. Probably won't happen this session, might be the next one, but he's building the sort of serious coalition and is a strong leader in St. Louis that we need to do
And
this.
he's launching for Congress today.
Well, I don't think you could seriously talk about criminal reform without addressing the issue Brian Williams is, along with the issues the governor is. I think those things go together.
Absolutely, and he's doing the serious hard work to do it, to have a long-term solution.
Representative, who won the week?
Nicole Galloway did. The Biden-Harris ticket is only going to energize minority voters in the state of Missouri, and that bodes well not for just Auditor Galloway, but also people like me on the ballot.
If she was sitting back Valentine's Day, she could have picked two people to be at the top. I think she would have picked these two.
Agreed.
Who won the week?
Oh, Ann Wagner. Her race is really starting to turn. Jill Shoup has been running on rainbows and unicorns for the last few months, but finally her voting record is coming out to the public.
Who won the week?
I think Scott Faughn and civil discourse. I got to tell you, as a hillbilly from that was the mayor at a young age of 21 or something to what you do today, you have created more civil discourse between Republicans and Democrats at dinner, on this show, and other things. And this is a time we need it, and very few people do it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. It means a lot to me. I'm going to say another person for the media won the week. Hank Waters, the former publisher of the Columbia Tribune, long family history in Columbia. You might not have agreed with him if you were Republican on everything. You might have agreed with his paper on everything. But he ran a great publication that you knew was straightforward, you knew where it was coming from, and it cared about that community, cared about that college. If you like Columbia today and you like the University of Missouri, Hank Waters is one of the giants you have to thank for that. I think his passing was very sad, but I think he won the week and probably won the line. We hope you'll join us next week on This Week in Missouri Politics.
This Week in Missouri Politics, sponsored by the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, Spire, and Sterling Bank.